Playing certain chess moves can seem very tempting until you realize that you blundered. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 different chess moves that you should never do because doing those can lead to quite bad consequences in the game. Now, all of these mistakes were made by my dear subs, and well, I'll start with the most beginner mistake and I'll be going up in level, but these are all mistakes that everyone should know of. So let's get right into the first one. The first one, I'll show the full game actually because it was only 7 moves long. It started with e4, c5, and then very quickly in the Sicilian, it went very wrong for my opponent. They went bishop b5, which is already now quite a strange move because the bishop is not doing much here, but they probably just wanted to stop me from pushing this pawn, but I just said thank you and pick up this pawn. And after I picked up this pawn, they did the move that you should never ever do in these situations before you've castled, and even after you've castled most of the times. They went f3. If you've heard the saying, never go f3, there's a reason for it. After f3, and they did this because they thought that my knight was very annoying in the center and they wanted to kick it away, which makes sense. But they missed that they're opening up for the king, and this knight together with the queen, they are perfect. Queen and knights are absolutely amazing together. So I was able to bring out my queen to h4 over here, checking the king. And now if the king moves somewhere, I'm going to be checkmating them. And if the king, well, if the pawn pushes over here, then I have this move, knight takes pawn, and if they capture me back, I can take the rook. Why? Because this pawn is pinned. So the game went on king f1, queen f2, checkmate in 7 moves. Never ever play f3 before you have castled. Just don't do it. It's gonna be bad. The next mistake, this one was a little bit more subtle, and well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things. Once again, I'll show you the full game. It wasn't very long. This became an e4, e5 game. I was testing different openings. I typically play c5. And now they went a3. And this is a very slow move. You don't want to go a3 because you're not doing anything. This pawn over here, you know, you should be busy developing your pieces. You should castle. You should do all those kinds of important things. But this move, it's just not doing anything. It's a move saying, hey, I'm a little scared of your bishop going here, but I'm just not going to do anything. So this, and now they started pushing their pawns and they moved up their knight, which was good. And then they went for the other side and they went for this as well. They really didn't want my bishops to pin the knights. Maybe because, you know, bad things have happened when their opponents have pinned the knights, but these are just not really things that you should do. But this is not the big mistake. These are just, I'm recommending you to not go for this. If my opponent wouldn't have gone for these moves, they would have had time to get the bishops out and castle and, you know, be fully developed, which you want to be, because the more pieces you can have already in the action in the game, the more pieces you can use to get a better position. So I castled here and they decided to pin my knight. I really think this person loves pinning knights. I decided to bring my bishop out. And, you know, I don't know why they were so excited about the pin, because they just decided to take immediately, which is a mistake because now I'm just able to get my queen out. I've already developed all of my pieces, so getting my queen out now, it's not dangerous. And they went queen d2. Now in this position, I brought my knight up because it's the middle game for me. You know, my opponent still has the bishop and the king that hasn't castled, but I'm right now enjoying the middle game with all my pieces roaming around the game. So I have plenty of stuff to do. So I'm bringing my knight up to the center of the board. And now my opponent castled, which already now it's like, I mean, it's giving up this knight. But I decided to not capture this knight because I just didn't want a bishop getting active. I don't know. I could very much have captured here, but I just went c6 to stop this knight from coming up over there. And then decided to get the queens changed. Now, this is pretty much fine. I mean, you know, there's still an enemy to take here, but that's totally okay. I decided to exchange the queens. And in this position, I decided to push my pawn because I wanted to get these 2 pawns to start attacking this. And I was simply saying, hey, this knight over here, you know, it's pretty weirdly placed. If you take my bishop, I'll capture back. And then boom, my rook will be super strong on this file. So they went knight back, which right now, I mean, still, like, my opponent hasn't developed this bishop. The bishop needs to get out. All pieces need to get out. And now we can start seeing that my opponent's position is a bit strange. This knight is a little bit out in the air in an unprotected square. This knight is retreating when, you should get this bishop out. This bishop has no way to get out. The rooks are not connected. I mean, there's plenty of things. And more importantly, right now, the king and the knight on the same diagonal, which you may say now, Anna, it doesn't matter. But trust me, the way things went, it did matter. So I decided to capture because I saw a free pawn. And now everybody. Okay. And this is now the move number 2 you should never do. Now, move number 1 was never go f3 before you've castled. Move number 2. Listen very carefully. Do not put your pieces on the same diagonal if your opponent has a bishop of that color. What do I mean with that? Well, my opponent now, they could have done several things, but the best thing would have been to just simply move this knight by taking this bishop. Just simply take this and get rid of this issue because this knight and the king are in the same diagonal. But that didn't matter. This knight and the king are in the same diagonal. My opponent needed to realize that this one needs to get out because this is a black diagonal, dark squared diagonal. I have a dark squared bishop, so, scary things can happen. But what did my opponent do? They decided to add another piece to the diagonal. So they went rook over here. And this is now an issue because of several things. The first thing, because this knight, they didn't, do anything about the fact that there was this check. But the second thing, because now they're losing a lot of material. So this went south very quickly. I don't know if it was that they wanted to move this bishop somehow and threaten my bishop, do some fancy move like that. Or if they just wanted to stop the check and they said, hey, if I block the check instead of moving my king, if I block the check, she's not going to have a check anymore. But now I went bishop here. And now in this position, my opponent really needs to move the knight. I mean, I'm threatening the knight. They really need to move it. But they did probably what was one of, I don't know how to put this, but, one of the moves that, one of the worst moves that they could have done in this position. And it's rook d, oh no, it's king d1. Yeah, exactly. I thought actually it was with the rook, but it's actually going to be the exact same thing. Now, why is king d1 such a bad move? Well, the reason for king d1 being such a bad move is because I'm going to now start by picking up this knight. But then now, when I'm threatening this rook, the rook has nowhere to go. The king just took away the last square that the rook could go to. So I am actually right now going to be winning a full rook. And, well, the game went on for a bit, but I was a rook up and I ultimately won this game. But what can you take from this game? Always be careful with your pieces being on the same diagonal. Like this diagonal over here, especially if your king is one of the pieces involved. But even if it was just the knight and the rook, it doesn't matter, It would have been the same thing. So if your opponent has a queen or a bishop that can go to these squares, never put your pieces on that diagonal like this. And now we're going to go for the third one. And this is the highest level one. And this is quite nice. So I had the white pieces. And if you're wondering what beautiful bakery thing that you're seeing over there, it's a semla. It's a Swedish semla. It's a really good pastry, absolutely amazing. I love it. So the game went like this. This became a queen's gambit. And yeah, this is now Slav. And they went a6. I went c5. It's just a line that you can play. But now b5 is quite unusual. It's okay. You can play it. The idea is that my opponent wanted to get some space here. They wanted to push the pawn and threaten my knight and do all kinds of stuff. But these pawns get a little bit weak. And also, I mean, like, this knight and the bishop are not fantastic. But yeah, I mean, you can play it. You can play b5. So bishop f4, this. And then I decided to just bring my pieces out like I love doing. Put my bishop on the long diagonal, looking towards the king. Knight out, we castle. You always do the same thing. I mean, I don't know if you guys are realizing, but I just develop and castle instantly every single game. And now my opponent went b4, threatening the knight, so I moved it. And now h6. And actually now my opponent has the issue with this pawn, so I could have gone queen a4 to try to, sorry, I don't know why. I gave my queen some wings and tried to make it a knight, but yeah, I could try to threaten this pawn, but instead I just decided to bring in my rooks. So on bishop b1 to get a battery going on over here. I wanted to go bishop b1 and then queen z3 and get my queen and my bishop on the same diagonal looking towards h7. And so my opponent went knight h5, which you want to be careful when you put your knights on the rim on a square where they're unprotected, but it's okay. It's threatening my bishop. I get it. I understand. It's fine. And so I went for my plan. I went queen z3. e3. And now the bishop and the queen are both looking towards the square. I'm threatening checkmate in one move. Now, many times I will see people, especially beginners, forget that this bishop is here because the bishop is on the side of the board, and sometimes it can be hard to see what is this bishop doing in here. What does that have to do with my king? It's on the other side of the board. But all diagonals are interconnected, and you should always be very aware of a bishop and queen battery. Here in this position, they went knight d f6, which is totally fine. They're bringing this knight out. But what happens in this position? Well, what is happening is that now my opponent needs to be very careful because all of a sudden this knight over here has no squares. It cannot go to any square apart from me from taking this bishop. So I moved my bishop, of course, because I don't want him to be able to take my bishop. And in this position, my opponent did a move that was just not good. And the move was rook e8. And why is this not good, you may say? You may say, okay, this move is not doing anything. Why is this such a terrible move? Well, because my opponent, with this whole plan that they did right here of putting the knights like this, what they did was that actually they overworked this knight. Yes, you can overwork your chess pieces. This knight now has many jobs. In fact, two main jobs. The first main and most important job is to prevent the checkmate. And this is why I'm saying this a little bit more high level, because we're talking about overworking, but it's a really important concept in chess. They're one, preventing me from checkmating, but they're also preventing me from winning a piece with this move g4. So in this position, by placing the knights in a way where they're dependent on each other, I mean, in the sense that this knight is this knight is dependent on this knight, but this knight is dependent on saving the checkmate. My opponent missed this move g4, which is really beautiful. And now the knight is trapped. And now my opponent is just losing a piece. So actually, they ended up taking the pawn, and then this became a checkmate in two. So what can you take from this? Do not overwork your pieces. Do not put a piece in a square where it has several different jobs, because at some point your piece is not going to be able to do one of those jobs, and then your position is going to collapse. So it all started with going knight to the rim and putting the knights on the side of the board, but it continued with this idea of not understanding that this knight was being overworked by both, you know, defending this and this. So whenever you put your pieces on the rim or whatever, one, make sure that they can escape, make sure that they're not trapped. Two, make sure that your pieces are not overworked. This position, actually, the best move, but this is really difficult, would have either one been to go g6, easy peasy, just getting a square for the knight to escape to, or even a5, but this is kind of hard. But here the idea is that if g4, there is the move bishop a6, threatening the queen, threatening the knight, and now if the queen moves, there is this move bishop takes knight, and now if I take here, they're gonna take my knight. And, you know, if I don't, then I have a lot of, well, if I take here, well, then now they can take here. So that would have been a better move, but that was really difficult. And that is why, you know, if those moves are difficult, don't put yourself in a position like this. But definitely make sure that your pieces are never trapped and your pieces are never overworked. So I hope that this was helpful to you. These are some little simple tricks and concepts to think about so that you don't commit these mistakes and don't lose like this. Thank you so much for watching the video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in my next video.